Hey you, Meowkaiser coming back at you today with another guide. Today I wanted to talk about well specifically rooting and flexing, right? What makes a good root, and should you be following a root, should you be flexing, how all that works. So let's start with, well, what is a root, right? A root is a set of locations that you're going to be going to, as well as different items that you're going to be picking up, right? So for example, the Leon roots, right? For Lighthouse, Archery Range, Pond, we'll have you go here, you'll pick up Iron Knuckle, Iron Ore, grab a lighter. You'll use 2 of those lighters for 4 boiling waters. You hold 1 lighter, you get the glasses if you see it, and then you go to Archery Range, you grab the feather, you grab the fabric armor, leather, thick paper, you make a lie, right? Maybe another leather if you get the opportunity. You head to Pond, you make your shield, you make your poison, and then to Schrodinger's box, and from there you would go slums, for instance. You would get the cloth. It assumes a situation where you're able to get this route without anybody contesting you, and that is the biggest thing about rooting that a lot of people don't understand. I see this happen way too many times. They start Lighthouse, right? And then they go to Archery Range, they get contested, right? So they leave Archery Range for a little bit. Let's say they go here, they make some food, and then they come back. Oh, they're still there. Okay, they don't know what to do anymore. This is not what you want to do, right? So you need to be able to recognize different branches that you can do, right? So let's say that you get contested at Archery Range, it's no longer possible, right? So instead of going to Trail, make some food, and come back, you go to Trail, right? Grab a branch, bring it over to school, do Windbreaker, hope for arm warmers, right? Because you need that for your second sheet metal. And then if you can't get arm warmers, you go to forest, you grab the leather so that you can go make sheath instead. You have to recognize all these different options. And one of the biggest things about flexing is recognize, okay, how can I flex out of certain situations, right? So in the particular example I mentioned here, right? So typically this root wants to build 2 steel because you're holding on to the iron ores. You go here, you grab the fabric armor, and then you go and you grab the turtle shell and you make a leather shield, right? And then you use 1 steel for the steel shield and then another steel for the sheet metal armor, right? It's nice and efficient, especially when you go to slums and you grab your scrap metal here, right? That's just one option. Some people go to Pond Factory, for example. But the point is that is the steel flex, right? Steel sets have a little bit more, it's not very lenient, right? You have to grab the fabric armor in order to do this, and you have to get a turtle shell with leather. Leather is particularly difficult to get in most points of the game in order to get the leather shield. The only option that you have out of steel, right, for your arm, for example, you can do, where is it? Gauntlet into Atlas Gauntlet, right? That's the one other option if you just can't get leather at all, which sometimes happens and you just end up doing it, right? For the 2 sheet build, so your flex options are, you get arm warmers if you can. You do need the Windbreaker, but thankfully there's 6 here. So if you get school at some point during the game, you can usually get it. But you either go for Bazoo Band, or you come here and you get your sheath. And yes, you do see Sword of Shah Jahan when I play. I don't know why people don't go for this when they get messed out of their steel sheet route, right? Because one of the hardest things about steel sheet routes is that arm warmers is just hard to find, right? There's only 3 here. There's 3 here, there's 3 here, and there's 1 here. So you're not likely to find it out of town at all. And school and slums tend to be really popular locations because they have lighters, right? You got 7 lighters here, and you got 5 lighters here. So you're going to find a lot of situations where you're going to go looking for your arm warmers, and then people stop by because they're looking for lighters. That's another thing to consider, right? So one thing that you have to recognize when you're choosing a route and how all the routing works is you have to look at your lobby as soon as it starts, right? So you need to look at, okay, who's in the lobby, right? So a good way to realize this is recognizing, okay, what masteries tend to start where, right? So Han, for instance, likes to start Lighthouse, Town Hall, Forest, or Alley usually, right? And then Stab would start School, Uptown. Sometimes I see them Temple, but School and Uptown are definitely more popular. Blade you typically see at Ponds, Lighthouse, or Temple. Those are really popular areas. And notice how I said Lighthouse again, right? So Blade has to be aware that Hand would want to start here. For instance, Bow you usually see at Factory or Archery Range. For starts, gun you usually see at beach, docks, or chapel. Beach being the strongest one because of that stupid weapon. Like, what the heck is this? I'm going to complain about this on all of my guides, just so you guys know. It's a dumb gun. And then throw will start hotel, forest, chapel, or even school, right? And so you have to look at your lobby and you have to recognize, okay, what's their second location? What am I likely going to see them do, right? What's convenient about gun is that you pretty much know that one person is always going to start beach, right? They go beach, they go school, they go factory. So you have to be wary of that. So like, let's say I was playing stab, right? And there's like 5 guns in the lobby. I'm not going to start school because most gun routes go school second. Instead, I'm going to start uptown. That way I get contested a lot less often, right? Now, obviously, if I get contested uptown, then I don't want to fall back on school. I might do a route out of alley or out of cemetery or to chapel. You know, just being aware of these options is really important in order to make sure that you get the best routes. And some of the highest win rates we see in this game is when somebody pioneers a route nobody's ever seen before and it happens to be efficient, right? Like when Town Hall Hand was really good. There was one guy doing it. He was the #1 player on Black Survival for a long time. And what he would do is he would grab cloth fan, he would grab the slippers, he would grab hammer sometimes, playing cards if it happens, and then he would just head to factory, rush Uchiwa, right? And he would be on crude hand the whole time. And then later in the game, he would come here, he would grab his iron knuckles, and he would go for Bloodwing Knuckle, right? But it was a very flex-heavy build, and because it was difficult, it was very difficult for a lot of people to emulate it. And so you would go into the games, and even though everyone knew that that was the route he was running, nobody else knew how to do it. And this was a route at the time where there wasn't a lot of Blunt going Town Hall because Blunt was really weak. So that's the general idea when it comes to what's a good route, what's not. In general, you want a route where you don't get contested, you get everything for free, or you're playing a character that can get it for you for free, right? That's another thing to consider, right? Like recognizing the strengths of certain routes. Like, for instance, on throw, the Bone Crusher build is actually a lot stronger than everything else if you can get it. If you watch my streams, you'll know what I mean by if you can get it. You'll usually have to stop by here. You'll get your Bone Crusher, and then, well, not your Bone Crusher, your Tomahawks, and then you'll try to get here to get your scrap metal, your wires, and then you'll try to stop for your batteries, and you usually have to get like 3 batteries, 3, 4 batteries, 3, 4 wires, and like 6 steel, right? And so the problem with that is that if you have a gun in the lobby, they're going to be a factory, right? If you have a bow in the lobby, they're going to be a factory. Things become really complicated really fast if you don't have a game plan when you're running a greedy build. Same thing goes for the Chapel Throw start that builds off of Holy Grail. Use Saint's Relic's passive bonus mastery for crafting weapons, +1, right? And then what they'll do is they'll take the other crosses, they'll make a bunch of these, they'll make their armor, and then later in the game they'll come here, they'll take the spear handle, create javelins, and make 1,000,000 pylums because this is also here, and then come here, make more pylums, get a time mastery, and then finish with Astrape, right? So you have to recognize, like, okay, if this is something that I can get for free, I should 100% go for it, right? Like, Astrape is a 44 stat attack weapon, but then you got Bone Crusher, which is 51 stat attacks. If you can get a Bone Crusher build, you 100% go for it. If you look in higher level players that play throw, right, you almost see them go for Bone Crusher like 90% of the time. And a lot of that has to do with Koreans knowing that they can get away with it because of their ping advantage. But the other part of it is just, it's that strong. Like, I see them play and they either lose the game immediately because it's an incredibly hard build and has very low food, or they just stomp, right? So that's another thing to consider. What else do I want to say? Yeah, also for your routing, you have to consider how much food is in it, right? Nocti has actually said this in one of her videos, where if you see people with a certain item, right? So let's say you're running the Lighthouse Trail build, right? You take your lighter, you get a bunch of boiling water, you make a bunch of food here, right? Let's say you decide to run to factory, and you run into somebody who's using the Bone Crusher build, right? If you run into them early into the game, you know they don't have a lot of food. So you might be like taking maybe like 10, 20 damage extra from them, but you'll decide to take the trade anyway just to give them a harder time for taking a greedier routes. That's another thing that you can do to punish people. You also see Shoichi's doing the same thing. When the Town Hall route was really popular, you would see people pick Shoichi and they would start Town Hall, phony deal whoever's here, right? Kick them out, and then they would just go to Uptown or they go to school and just do their build as normal. That was something very common. Or when, you know, Gun was super strong and, you know, there was a million people playing Gun, people would pick Leon, right? They would go here, they would stop by beach, human torpedo somebody, and then run to archery range. That was just how it would go. And they would basically just, as long as there was noise at beach, they would just come there and human torpedo them over and over again. That's how they would counter Gun. It wasn't really a strong counter, but it was a thing you can do. So being aware of what your opponents are doing helps a lot with your own routing. Like, let's say you notice like there's a lot of noise at school and slums. That means a lot of people are going for the 2 sheet metal build. So instead you'll want to go for like 2 steel, or you'll want to go a very more flex heavy. So like a flex heavy build would use armors that don't require steel sheet and steel sheets and just steel, right? So like, for example, you might decide to go for Dragon Dawbuck because that doesn't require stuff that's very like in the way of everything else, right? And you can actually use these to fill in certain parts of your build, right? So like, let's say you go for a 2 steel build, right? And you use one of your steel for your weapon. And so you're just like, okay, I'm gonna use my other steel for my arm. And then like, let's say I'll go make a Dragon Dawbuck, or even better, if you just happen to get 3 cloth, right? You decide, not this, you decide instead to go for Tuxedo, right? For arm, your flex option is usually drop near unless you get lucky. You gotta keep in mind, like if you get RNG, you have to adjust whatever you're doing to that. So like, let's say you weren't able to get your arm gear for whatever reason, right? You got forced off of it, right? You have to pay attention to corpses. You have to pay attention to whatever RNG gives you. Let's say it gives you a mithril, right? And you're just like, okay, I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna make a Captain Shield, right? Well, mithril shield. It's not called Captain Shield anymore. But, or you get the ogre skin and you are doing a 2 sheet routes and you weren't able to get to leather shield, then you just go and make OPG. Well, it's not OPG, it's Atlas Gauntlet. I keep forgetting the new names because this game keeps changing names. Anyway, so that's the basic principle of how routing works and how you generally want to be moving around the map. When you move around the map, you want to be keeping into context, okay, what is everyone else doing? What is likely to happen, right? And this also helps too when you're trying to build food, right? So let's say there was like blunts in the lobby, right? Town Hall is super popular for blunt. So let's say that you killed a bird, you got some bird eggs, right? And you want to make fried egg, you have a lighter. So you need to find oil somewhere. Well, there's 2 oil at Town Hall. But if you're playing in a lobby with a bunch of blunts in the lobby, right? The most popular weapon is Banana Leaf Fan. And that uses oilcloth and cloth, which they usually get both at Town Hall. If there's going to be any oil in the mid to late game, there's going to be 1. And most likely it's just not going to be there. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. So hopefully that helps a lot. When you're trying to get better at this game, it helps to learn a lot of different routes, even routes that you yourself don't use for your mastery, just to be aware of what other players do. It'll help improve your games. It'll help you make more efficient choices, as well as making your general routing a lot stronger. So I hope this helped you win some more games, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.